Hey everybody, welcome back. So I'm just going to go over something that I'm currently still finishing it off, but it's pretty cool and I can't wait. So I'm going to show you now, and it's in relation to the work that I was doing in the previous video with the Fibonacci clocks, and then delving deeper into that, understanding that there are a series of clocks, and so I've dubbed. This is just my own interpretation, but it's something I've dubbed the Infinity Series, where I've gone through each and every one of them and I've coded and found the coding in between the Fibonacci sequence, Lucas, and so on. Not claiming that I've done that, but those sequences are already quite well known. But what I did find, as I'm in the previous video, is that I found all of the other numbers and their linking pairs. So the pairing of the number 1 and 8 code, so Fibonacci over here is the multiplication of 1 plus the previous number. And then over here we have the multiplication of 8 plus the previous number. And in doing so, we have the exact opposite of Fibonacci. It is legitimately just Fibonacci and Lucas and the 5 and also the 369 code, but in complete reverse opposites of each other. So one will flow clockwise, one will flow counterclockwise. And you can see that here if you want to look at it. I think I mentioned it previously, but the reason why I'm saying it again is because I'm just plotting these numbers out. And as I say, I'm still working on this, but I'm just excited because what I've done here is, now in previous videos and when I've watched people do this, they always pop the Fibonacci number at 112, and then they put the Lucas number at 213, and then the pi code at 314. Now this code here, I didn't find any research on until I purchased the Philomath, I don't know if I've said that right, by Robert E. Grant. And upon reading, I'm still reading it, I've only up to like probably the 10th page, and I probably should read the entire thing because I keep finding new things as I flip a new page. But as I was working this sequence out, I figured it out, and then I flipped over the page and I realized he'd already done it for me. So it just confirmed that these four, and he calls them I can't remember exactly what he calls. It's something in musical tones. Starts with Q. But anyway, quartets. The four quartets. So he calls these the four quartets because they all flow within each other. And so the Fibonacci, the Lucas sequence, the pi sequence, or pi Bonacci, if you want to call it that, and the 369 sequence all flow in the same way, and they all amount or get close to the golden means ratio. If you know how it works within Fibonacci, it's basically the same thing in the others. They all do it. So what I'm showing you here, however, is if you notice, this isn't the Lucas sequence. It's 2, 2, 4, 6, and so on, and this isn't the pi sequence. It's 4, 4, 8, and there's a reason why. If you can see over here, I've highlighted where the pi sequence starts. 3, 1, 4, and the Lucas sequence is over here, 2, 1, 3. Now, what I want to show you is when we line them up, and this is why this clock and everything's just sort of building on itself. I started from 1, then I built this thing out, and then I found stuff in there that then built out to this, and it just keeps overlapping, and it just keeps flooding out. There's so much more that I'm going into, and I'm still going through, and I'll explain that in a second. But basically what we have here is we have the lining up of the double digits, and there are only specific double digits across each one. So the Fibonacci sequence has the double digits of 1 and 8, and only those two digits are together when you compress the numbers down. Now what I want to show you is then the Lucas has the 2 and 7, the 369 code has the 3 and the 6, and it repeats pretty much every 12 points, or every 7 points, my apologies. And then we have the pi code, or the pi Bonacci, which has the 4 and then the 5. But if we're starting these codes at the 3 and the 2, so 213 and then 314, this doesn't line up, and we don't actually find what I'm going to show you now. When we do this, if we follow this code and we compress all the numbers up to the 24th point, this is not new to some of you. If you've been following the work of Jane 108 or even Robert E. Grant and a few other people, you will already know this, that it will compress down to a 9. And so the 9 is the very 24th number, and then it repeats itself back at the very beginning of Fibonacci. Now Lucas does the same thing. And what happens is the 9 just appears somewhere else, because what's happening is we're starting from here, the 2, 1, 3, and then we're compressing the numbers down, and the 9 pops up right there. But what happens when we line up the double digits, okay? And I did this over here, and that's how I found the last cycle of 9, and then just kept escalating from there. I want you to see the middle point. We have 144 is basically the 12th position. So the 12th position of the Fibonacci sequence is the value of 144. Take those single digits, it'll equal a 9. Now what I want to show you is the 12th position of what is then the Lucas sequence. Now not from this point, but from the double 2. When we take it from the double 2 and we line it up, it's 288. It is exactly double the 144. Okay, now you want to see something cool. And you've probably already seen this, but check this out. If we follow the same logic as Fibonacci, take this number and plus this number, which is actually take this number, times it by 1, which is the same, then add the previous number. We get the next one, which is 432. For those of you who follow certain numbers and stuff like that and values, you'll notice that 432 sequence is within the 369 code, and it hits the 12th point. And then when we take the 432 and the 288, it equals the 4th channel of 720. And there's our pi Bonacci. But starting at the 4, and the pi is right there, 314. So we still have that seed, we just didn't start from there. So as I said, the way that this expressed itself, and I have Numberphile, the YouTuber Numberphile, and their the material that I found off of there over like a 6-hour binge of your videos. Thank you for that. It was something that was mentioned in one of their videos where they said that the Fibonacci sequence can basically be categorized in a way of you're taking the first number, multiplying it by 1, and then the previous number. And that's when they were explaining the Pell sequence, where Pell sequence is multiplication of 2 plus the previous digit. So then there was something that was mentioned in a previous book. I can't remember where, and it's mentioned a few times in relation to Fibonacci. You have to know the previous number in order to get the next number. That's actually not the case when we do it like this. You see, if we start at the number 1, okay, and then we just add the code of times 1 plus previous, what happens is this. 1 times 1 is 1. Plus previous, there is nothing prior, so it's just 1. So then the next number is a 1. And the same thing happens here, and the same thing happens here, and the same thing happens here. And when we do this, we have the same thing then occurs. So our seed, our beginning, is actually just the number itself that we're utilizing the code of times plus previous, or you guys will know mathematical terms. I'm not very good with that lingo, but I just understand what's happening. I can see the patterns occurring. And so when we do it this way, we don't need the previous number. There is no need for the past because we know what the present moment is. There was nothing prior. So 1 times 1 is just 1. And then 1 times 1 plus 1 is then 2. We do the same thing here. We follow the exact same sequence. 2 times 2 times 1 is 2, plus 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is 3, plus 3 is 6. But when we come to the Pell sequence, we follow the same logic, but we go by 2. So 1 starting number is 1 times 2, plus nothing behind it will equal 2. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 equals 5. And then we change the seed. We change it to a 2, a 3, and the 4. And when we do this, and as I said, I haven't plotted every number out on this graph yet, but it's going to be interesting to find out that they will most likely, if I'm not mistaken, follow the exact same synchronicity that they will follow themselves in this category too. Now, when we get to the bigger numbers, there's a lot bigger of a number. I don't think I'm going to be able to fit it in here, but it's a little bit of an interesting thing to look at. So what we have is the Pell sequence goes across this way, and it hits the 12th point, and it hits a 9, okay? And this is important because this is how this cycle actually works. The 9 is the turning point, or if you would refer to it as the singularity. It is the central point at where the energy changes from positive to negative, okay? And this is now I'm going into something a little differently, and I'm going into what happens within the energetic situation in Chinese medicine, for example. When we take and I'm just going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here. I'm in grey lead, so I won't ruin my little thing. But what happens is we have a flow of energy, which is called the, oh, wow, I've lost the, the word for this, but I'll probably pop it in later. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So we have the flow of energy from one point, and then it flows to the other point. And so these points then give us the rising and falling of yin versus yang. So if you are familiar with Chinese medicine, you have what is called the five elements, or the six divisions in a sense. So we have what we would call then the pericardian. So the pericardian, let's just say sitting here, pericardian channel, and then this is yang, okay? And then we have this point right here, which is then the polarity shift of yang to yin. So this would be representing our number 9, so to speak. And this is why I used the trigrams in the previous flip of this. When we flip this point, the pericardian channel flows into the sanjiao, and the sanjiao is yin, okay? And that hits this point here. And then from the yin, it will revert at this point to the next channel. The biorhythm clock, thank you. I'm so sorry, I completely sidelined here. And I've actually got it here. Just give me a second. So you'll see, I forgot that I had this in front of me. I've actually plotted this out over here. And so here it is here. The pericardian, sorry, there it is on the bottom there. I've just flipped them around. Pericardian is yin. My apologies. Pericardian is yin. It's not yang. Oh, God, you'd think I would know that. It's been a long day, guys. Pericardian is yin, and it comes up to its yang counterpart, sanjiao, which then flows into the gallbladder channel, which is the wood element, and then it hits its pivot point here. And so we have the pivot point of one element to another, and then we have the pivot point of yin and yang energy at the center. And so this flow, okay, this sine wave in a sense, or whatever you want to call it, it happens across all the channels, and there are 6 of them in Chinese medicine. And when it hits the pericardian again after kidney, so the kidney channel and the bladder channel, which is the water element, the yin turns to the yin of the pericardian, comes back up and hits the sanjiao again, and that cycle of energy keeps flowing. And so it flows in that manner. And so when we look at it in this manner and we flip this out, we see that same flow in our number of sequences. Now, what we also see is we see a consistent flow in a different way, and there's a consistent flow in another way. If you look here, you have the descending of the numbers 8, 7, 6, 5, 7, 5, 3, 1. They're all odd. And then if we look at their counterpart on the other side, 2, 4, 6, 8. They're all even. And this brings me back to here. So there's a flow, there's a synchronicity to this. So I'm going to be plotting out all of them because, as I said, I found all of them across the multiplication of 1 all the way up to 9, and I went up to 10, 11, and 12. And basically, as I said before in the previous video, if I did, I don't know, it was 30 minutes long, so I can't remember. But what I mentioned was that when we hit number 10, and we're multiplying by 10, following that same logic, we just repeat the Fibonacci sequence. It is the exact same code, just a different value has been given to it. So what happens is it's almost as if we're extrapolating in one flow, and I'm going to show you actually within this drawing that I did. And let's say we're at this point here, okay, the point of stillness, that point of singularity, right at the center of creation, and we're flowing out. And as we flow out, we start one cycle of something, and then we flow into another cycle, and then we flow into another cycle and another, and until we complete all 8 aspects, 8 levels in a sense. And then as we hit all 8 levels, always coming back to the center. Remember, the center is 9. Once we hit that last point, we can choose to just flow back in the same cycle, or we can expand into a new cycle. And then we have what is then the next level of creation, if you want to call it that, because we have another level. We have the same code of Fibonacci at number 1, for example, and it starts with that Fibonacci sequence, then it flows into Lucas, and then from Lucas it goes to 369. But the value is different. The value is much higher. And so when we talk about things in relation to energy, and we're talking about, I'm going a bit off topic here, but bear with me. When we're talking about things like the raising of consciousness or the raising of awareness, the raising of your energy or vibration and stuff like that, what we're talking about is a raising of the value of your vibratory rate, okay? So if the value is low in a sense, and I'm just using this as an example, don't take me literally here, just to give you an explanation in a different manner. if the value is low, so if we're going to take an emotion to it, and if you have a very low emotion, we all know what low emotions feel like, okay? Sadness, grief, frustration, anger, resentment, all of those bad emotions. We call them bad emotions because we don't want to be in them. And they would vibrate at a very low frequency. They're very dense. So then when we take those emotions and we raise them up an octave, raise it up an octave, raise it up an octave, it's technically has the same code. It's just a different value. It's a different value. It's a different expression. And so it's the same in one way. It is a polar opposite of something. And with everything, there is a polar opposite. There is always, remember, we live in a dualistic world, okay? There is the sun above us, there is the ground below us, there is fire, there is water. Everything is dualistic. Not to say that it is separate, but it is complementary of itself. And remember, everything is still part of the same thing. So just as the fire and the water are complete opposite polarities in a sense, and it's just like the polarities of a magnet is positive and negative, but they're still connected at the center, and they still have a transitional point. So everything has that cyclical nature. And so that's why I'm talking about, and I went off on another tangent here, but that's why this is what it is, because it is, and as I dubbed it, it's the Infinity Series, but this is the Infinity Wheel, because it hits every plateau, and I can just go out and I can hit another version of this right here. And if those of you who follow sacred geometry, now let's look at it in geometric form. If we look at this in geometric form, we have what we would have dub the 8 spheres, the 8 circles. Now, when you're forming the flower of life, so to speak, you're forming only with 7 circles. But if you're doing it in a 3-dimensional mind frame, think of it 3-dimensionally. You start off with the first sphere, and then we split it in 2. So think of mitosis. We go from 2 to 4, okay, from 4 to 8, from 8 to 16, from 16 to 32. So if we're looking at it on a 2-dimensional plane, we will only see 7 spheres because we can't see behind the first sphere. Okay, so if we can't see behind this first sphere, technically speaking, what's happening is we have an 8th sphere. It's just hidden from our sight. So this is where that 7th sphere hides the 8. And this is why in esoteric acupuncture, for example, we have the 361 code, which is the 3 outer points and the 6 inner points hide that central point. Okay, and then so we have that central point of 361 instead of 360. That's just for those of you that that course of information. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I know I probably went off on a bit of a tangent. I tend to ramble. I tend to go on these things. I apologize in that way, but I'm just excited to share with you what I've been experiencing with this. And it's taken me a while to get it to a point that I can confidently explain it to you. And even now, like, there is so much more I can go into, but I have to keep these videos short. So this one is 20 minutes long, or 17 to be exact. No, 18 now. There you go. So hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have some sort of insight. If you want to comment below and let me know what else you find in relation to this. Remember, none of this is it's all subjective, okay? Because this is just my own understanding. This is my own version of this, my own take of this. I was never very good, not that I wasn't good at mathematics when I was younger, but I didn't really pay attention much at school. I did, but I didn't. It took certain topics, for example, were very hard for me to digest just because of the way that they were approached when I was in school. And you probably heard this a few times with people maybe in my generation. I don't know if it's prior to that, above that, but I found school easy in some aspects and very challenging in others because I didn't learn the way everybody else learned. I learned completely differently. And I learned through creativity. I learned through art. I learned through getting my hands dirty. And so when I'm delving into like complex mathematics, and this isn't that complex, but it's complex for me, and I'm still learning. If you were to show me trigonometry and algebra, it'll go over my head because you're regurgitating that sort of knowledge, and I just don't see it. I don't understand it. But when you can visually show me a visual representation of what those numbers mean, and that's why I love geometric patterns, because there's a visual representation of what these numbers mean, then it's clicked. Like I will learn every bit of it, and I have, and I've continued to learn after university, after high school. I've delved into books that I never thought I would ever have any interest in, and it's just beautiful how it all sort of flows out, how you can start from one thing and then just build yourself up to something else. So this is my little, I guess, advice for all of you out there. If there's something you want to learn, just go for it. Don't think of yourself as lesser. Don't let yourself be intimidated by what other people think. Remember, this is just my interpretation. Somebody's probably going to say I'm wrong, and that's fine. Don't care. Okay, but it's what I found, and it's what I enjoyed through the process. I enjoyed this process and how this piece came together and how everything has flowed out of it. And if there is something here, fantastic. If it's of use to somebody, fantastic. If it's absolutely pointless and meaningless to everybody else except for me, fantastic. I don't care. So that's the purpose of what I want to share with you, is that you don't actually know what is of value until you delve into it. And then you delve into it and you realize you've got something that other people then find and appreciate. And this happens in life more times than I can possibly count for. So whether this will be appreciated or not, it's not the point. But this is just my expression of this and my understanding of this. And I'd like to hear what you think. Thanks, everybody. Bye bye for now.